first time, I believe, because we have Sonia here today. And so I wanted to just tell you briefly about our organization. Chicago Ions began in May of 1998. It was very guided. I had a near-death bike experience in spring of '95, and it takes about 9 hours to tell my story. I've got to write a book one of these days. I haven't gotten to it yet. Sonia was big on my path, and I'm really delighted to have her here today. But in the course of that, I was guided to start these meetings. It was not on my agenda. And the purpose, when I came back from my own experience, I had a passion to help people lose their fear of death. And that was the reason for being, and has been ever since. And in the process, I was guided to start these meetings, and we have had now about 1,200 people come to the meetings. Every month it's been different, and each one has been a wonderful, wonderful blessing. There's been amazing energy at these meetings and enormous amounts of love, and I have been very grateful to be able to lead them. Let's see, what do you need to know? We started having speakers. We run solely on the donations that we collect at the door. We have usually around 100 people every month. I expect that we'll probably have more today. Things kind of warm up slowly. The normal meeting starts with a meditation, which I will do shortly. This is John Fish, a wonderful pianist who's also a lawyer, a closet lawyer, I say.
During the week.
During the week. He has to provide for his family, but he's studying to be a massage therapist so that he can do meaningful work when he retires. Bad.
It's not far off.
No, he's a wonderful lawyer too, and if you want a nice spiritual lawyer, this is a good person to see. But again, I met John very synchronistically, and one of the results of my experience was that I came back with the ability to improvise music. I had never improvised 2 notes in a row before I went to the other side. And when I came back, I was guided one at a time to start playing. And a Native American flute maker in Colorado called me and said he was supposed to make me some flutes. I didn't call him, so I figured I was supposed to take them, but I didn't really want any because I had been in the Southwest in New Mexico the summer before, and I bought one at a flea market, and it was really an awful instrument, but I didn't know that. I just tried to play it, and it didn't respond, so I said, I really don't want any more of these. But when the gentleman called me and said, I'm supposed to do this for you, I said, well, I think that's something I better pay attention to. So I took them, and I started playing, and then I was guided to play with Ron Roth and Louise Hay, and I spent about a year working with Sonia in her book tours and things. And just one thing after another, met John. We produced a CD, which is for sale in the back if anybody's interested, called Improvisations from the Other Side, because I call it that because I can hardly claim that it's mine, because it's so channeled, because I close my eyes and I leave, and it's theirs. But it's very peaceful, and I think it's very healing music. I was blessed to be invited to play for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's funeral in the beginning of September. And I was told that they used it for the last 3 days of her life, and I was so delighted, and I felt so blessed, because if they hadn't told me, I never would have known. And as it was, they did tell me, so I got to know. Anyway, we usually have a meditation, and usually it's just me, because people wanted me to play it in the beginning, because it kind of changes the energy in the room. And it makes it's like when you have a plate with steel shavings on it, and you put magnet underneath, and you pull it along, and all the steel shavings line up like little soldiers in the right direction. It kind of does that to the energy in the room. We've discovered it makes the energy a lot easier, and you come in with all these energies going all these different ways, and it kind of makes everything go the same direction. So we do that, and then we usually go through our announcements, and then we do a sharing. I think we can probably do, well, we'll see how it is after the meditation, because we have more people now than we usually have. But if you come to another meeting, you'll hear people tell all of their experience, a lot of their experiences. We have people who come to our meeting who've had near-death experiences, or out-of-body experiences, or spiritual experiences that they don't understand or looking for some answers about, or maybe they've lost a loved one. And this is a subject that's particularly close to my heart because oh, I just noticed the thing's on. We got to turn it off, Bob, because we won't have enough battery to last you, Sonia, if we do me too. I didn't tell you that. I'm sorry.
Bye.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and in a way I feel like being in a group with people like this, especially around death and dying, are really my people. Because in my world, in my experience, I don't have an experience of life without being intimately connected with death. There was never really a veil or a separation in my life. When I grew up, for example, in my home, it centered around my mother. And she was Romanian, and she was from the, kind of a young child war bride and lost her family, a greater part of her family during the war. But not really, because they lived with us. I grew up with 6 brothers and sisters, my mother, my father, my grandparents, and about a half a dozen dead Romanian relatives. Some who stayed permanently and some who were just passing through. But they made their presence known. It wasn't just a metaphor. We would set the table for them, and they would turn on the lights. I had one in particular, a feisty Uncle Mitsu, who would turn on our lights in the kitchen, and my mom would say, "That's Mitsu, he wants to be part of it." So I grew up with an experience that life and death were not really that separated. It was very comfortable for me to accept and interact and enjoy the spirits, sometimes. Sometimes I didn't enjoy them because whenever I would ask my mother, for example, if I could do something as a kid, get permission to do something, she would always say, "Well, if it's up to me, I would say yes. But the spirits, they say no." So that kind of made me mad sometimes, that they had such executive influence over the family life. So at one point, that was okay. We tried to outsmart the spirits, and my brothers and sisters, we tried to negotiate with them in the dark at night, and it never worked, but we did our best, made us creative anyway. But then I think probably my first real dramatic experience, personally, with having a personal shift in my consciousness, was when I was in 4th grade. When I was in 4th grade, I came home from school. And I walked in the door, and I just said hello to my mom, and I was 2 feet into the door, and all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. And everything went black. Like it just overwhelmed me. And my mom got scared. She kept saying, "What's the matter with you?" And she went way far away from my consciousness. And I fell backward onto a stairway that we had leading up to the 2nd floor in this old bungalow house that I grew up in. And for maybe, I don't know, I lost consciousness of time. It could have been 5 seconds, it could have been a minute. But then the next thing I was back. And my mom's shaking me, and she's angry because that's what what would happen to her when she was scared. She'd always go to anger first. She's yelling at me, "What'd you do? What's the matter with you? You didn't eat lunch." All kinds of conjectures, and all I could say when I woke up was, "I don't know, I'm just thinking about my godmother, Evelyn." She said, "Evelyn, whom I didn't really see that often. But that's what I was talking about." And she said, "Well, that doesn't make sense." And she sent me to the kitchen. Well, it was only a matter of a couple hours later, the phone rang. And Evelyn's daughter called my mother hysterical because my godmother, at that exact moment that I was overwhelmed, had committed suicide by asphyxiating herself in the garage with the car. And I intercepted her experience. And when I came out of it, it jarred me. Not so much because of Evelyn, but because of the impact it had on my mother. Because my mother, being a war bride, had made this close friendship with this other woman. They shared that in common. They were both very young when they got married, 15, 16. My mother was 15. Evelyn was 16. She was from Spain. They both came over. And they both had relationships in big families that were very similar. And I know that my mom felt some kind of camaraderie there, that when she lost it, sent my mother into such a tailspin of depression and despair that I became convinced that I had to do something or my mother would do the same thing. I was sure, and I knew it in my soul, that if I didn't find some way to pull my mother out of this, that I would not be the first experience of suicide. So I went and had a talk with the spirits. And I told them they had to help me. Somehow, some way, pull my mother out of this loss. And the spirits said they would. And I felt it in my heart, and I felt it in my bones. And I felt that it was a purpose in my life, and I was only 12. And so I decided, I wasn't 12, I was 10. Next day I came up and said to my mother, you know, Mom, I do readings. And it caught her by surprise. She'd done readings, but I'd only, up until that time, kind of laid on the floor and listened to her. And I said, yes, I just want you to know I do readings. She was half curious, half thought maybe it might be true, half recognizing my desperation to try to do something for her. And I said, so I'll do a reading for you. And I remember that day, we sat down at the table. I was excited, and I remember my heart was pounding because I had her attention. My mother was an interesting woman. She's not dead, but I speak about that time in her life because she was another person then. She was deaf. That was a consequence of the war. And she was gone a lot. She was gone a lot in her consciousness. So to have her attention was something. And I started shuffling my cards. And I remember praying to God. I remember praying to Mary, and I remember talking to the spirits as I shuffled and I shuffled and I shuffled and I shuffled those cards, saying, help me here. You gotta help me here. Gotta help me somehow. And I remember shuffling them for 5 minutes while my mom was sitting there, waiting. And I laid them out and I stared at them for a long time. Finally I got something. I said, Mom, you're going to get a new pair of shoes. She looked at me and she said, really? When? And I looked at the cards for a long time. And then I said, soon. But something shifted. She laughed. She said, I'll write that down. And in that moment, something shifted. We came into an agreement. We started doing readings every day. I would look into life, and she would listen to me. And I would try to pull her forward, and she would pull me deeper into the other side, and I would pull her forward. And then she'd say, tell me about Nana, her mother that she lost. And I would look, and I would get messages, and I would see her face. And I would tell my mom how she was little and didn't look like us. And I said, she doesn't look like you either. She has a pointy nose, and she's kind of bald. And she said, that's Nana. And then I'd pull her forward, and she'd have something to look forward to, and then she'd pull me in. Tell me about my brother. I don't know what happened to him in the war. Tell me about my brother. They never found him. And I said, well, he lived for a while. He didn't die too early. He comes to me, and he looks like he's 20. She lost him when he was 5. And I'd pull her forward, and we did this dance. And she came out of her depression, and I learned how to do readings. That was my first introduction to the other side and the usefulness of being in contact with the other side when this side looks too bleak to carry on. So I started doing readings and I started being mentored by teachers. I had the most wonderful teachers. They set high standards for me and high bars and told me that just because something's on the other side doesn't mean it's necessarily something you should listen to or follow. They said there is such things as psychic riffraff, people who get crossover, but they're not necessarily any more immediately smarter. And I actually did have that experience. One of my clients, her husband crossed over because he was excessive in every area. He drank too much, he drove too fast, he spent too much, and he gambled. He blew it all. And in an act of despair, he kind of did himself in. They didn't really know what happened to him. But eventually she got contacted with through sheer earnestness and desire. But pretty soon he started giving her gambling tips. Next thing you know, she's going down too. I said, heck, just because he's on the other side doesn't make him any smarter. So the thing is that what I think was important in my early years is I learned very quickly. I understood it organically, and I think it's essential to your peace of mind. I understood organically that we are not our bodies. In fact, we referred to each other in our home as spirit. My mom would say, my spirit says. She wouldn't say, I say. And she would ask us, what does your spirit say? So I didn't ever have a strong attachment to my personality or my physical body. In fact, if anything, that's one of the challenges I still have today. I'm not so probably well developed in my personality, and I tend to neglect my physical body, which is why everybody says you're so skinny all the time. Because I really do get out of it. But I did learn very early, and it became interesting to me when I was a little older, how strongly people were identified to their bodies and their personalities, and had no concept of their spirit. I was like, well, how can you not know who you are? But I was young and didn't have the confidence to really dialogue it. I let it go. But in working with people over time, I started doing readings very young. And in working with people, I saw again and again and again that the ultimate crisis that people have is not understanding their spirit. And this tremendous fear that causes you to try to control life or negotiate some way to postpone death. It's like all-consuming for people, the interesting strategies they have to try to beat death ultimately. So I wasn't too far into my own vocation where I became convinced that I really did need to learn to be a teacher. That it wasn't enough to just fish the psychic waters and throw a fish or two here or there while people were really drowning in their own confusion. So I spent many years of my life in metaphysical study. I spent many years with teachers. I had a teacher that I feel so blessed to have had, and he's still with me, Charlie. My teacher, Charlie, when he taught me about spirit, would sit what they call a trumpet on the floor. It's an ancient and old school form of psychic readings. And we would get in a circle, and he would go into a trance, and the trumpet would rise and drop sometimes, and sometimes wet rocks would come flying out of it. I had one for the longest time that I kept, but I lost it when we moved the second time. And I was so devastated. And then Charlie came to me, presented himself to me in an out-of-body experience while I was dreaming, and he said, haven't I taught you anything? Let it go. Let it all go. So, I really realized that what's wrong with our perception, what's wrong with our paradigm, what's wrong with everything that's going on in our world is this lack of understanding that we're spirit. And that if we do have an understanding, it's like a metaphor or a chewing gum for your brain or something that you kind of say universally but don't really experience yourself to be spirit. this strong attachment to how things appear. Part of the reason I had to learn about spirit so young is because so many times when I was very young doing readings, I was in life and death situations. One of the most disturbing for me was I read for a woman who was having an affair. And that alone kind of rocked my boat at the time, because I was very young and people weren't supposed to do that according to my Catholic perspective. I didn't even know how to broach the subject, let alone explore it, but I kept telling her, you have to go home. And she thought it was some moral indictment. And all my guide said was, you have to go home, go home. And she laughed at me. And she said, well, does he love me or not? And I said, it doesn't matter, go home. And while she was out one night, her 12-year-old son, who was retarded and had a lot of disabilities, tried to cook his own dinner and set the house on fire and died. And she blamed me. And I was only 12.
Wow.
And so that was another huge boom for me of how do I deal with this? Was I responsible? Why didn't you say something more direct? But that's all I got. And then I'd have to say the most shocking for me, the most traumatic. Because still I was pretty cavalier with death and dying and kind of took it all in my stride. And often wondered why people had a problem. Don't you see the spirits? Don't you feel them? Believe me if you don't. Was pretty much my attitude until I was 16. And then a woman who was a relatively known, or maybe possibly notorious psychic in Denver, called me and asked me if I wanted to do something with her to help the police solve a murder case. Now, at 16 years old, you know, when I grew up and I was 16, the number one TV show was Mannix. I don't know if any of you old-timers can remember. And I thought, you know, Mannix, this is cool. Police, solve the problem. I was totally, absolutely flattered. It was all TV for me. It was all just a way to get attention. So I agreed. And we went up to this house in Salida. And she was very odd. She was very odd. She had a big black bag, and she would talk to the spirits, but they weren't any spirits I knew. I didn't know who they were, but they were kind of disturbing. And there was another guy with her, and they were older, and I was still I was very naive and going along with it. And I remember when we got out of the car, there was the family waiting for us. I had never connected that, waiting for us. And I realized that they were going to be deeply affected and hanging on something that maybe I could give them. And I remember my first reaction when I got out of that car was shame, because I never thought about someone's feelings. And I never personally dealt with anything quite that in my face. So immediately it threw me off. And then they said, I'm so grateful you're here, and hadn't done anything yet, and didn't know that I could. And we went into the house. Sure enough, a couple had been gunned down for some reason right before Christmas, right in front of a fireplace in their home in the mountains. And I was horrified. The blood was everywhere, the bodies, it was just like TV, except it was real. I was horrified. Horrified that something like this could happen. Horrified that these people had to suffer the unknown and tragic loss of their family in such a violent way. Horrified that the whole thing scared me to death. And then the woman opens her bag and whips out a crucifix and says, you all have to get out. Of course, I'm the first one running for the door. And she grabs me and says, no, not you. I'm just petrified. And her and this other fellow start marching around going, get out, you're evil spirits. And then she turns to me and she says, oh my God, you're too young. You can't resist the evil spirits. I freaked. Then she opens her bag and hands me some crystal thing and says, hold on to this, you can pay me later. I'm just nearly crying. I looked at her, I looked at the bodies, I looked at this crystal. I didn't have any money. I ran out the door. My heart was pounding so hard. I was crying. I was petrified. I ran past the family, past the cops, and down the mountain road, traumatized. And the cop came and picked me up, and he looked at me and he said, "You're just a kid. Where's your mother?" Who had, by the way, told me not to do this. Well, needless to say, it took me I shut down. Everything I had learned and believed about the goodness of the universe went out the door. I shut down. I wanted nothing to do with it. The universe became for me in that moment a bad place that I couldn't trust. I had never had that experience before. I couldn't trust it. And what if they were right? What if the bad spirits are with me? And everything became a blur and a fog of pure terror. It took me a year of working with a hypnotherapist and biofeedback. I remember burning salt on a skillet in my kitchen, begging God to protect me from the evil spirits. Every time I turned on the TV, of course it was another murder, I freaked out and shut it off. Forget the news. And I didn't trust anybody anymore. Maybe you murdered him. Maybe you murdered him. It freaked me out and shattered my sense of safety in the world like I had never experienced before. It was free fall. Total free fall. And I just felt like I was in the darkest night of the soul. What a horrible experience to be in your body in this world and not feel safe. And finally, after a year of work, prayer, crying, talking to doctors, one day my guides came back and they said, "You've learned." And it was all over. And I realized then that I had to have that experience to learn compassion, because what I had just been through, most of people live in every day, is so humbling. And that's when I decided I would spend my life helping people feel safe and secure in their spirit, in their skin, in the world. And it was a pretty daunting soul assignment. And that's what I'm still experiencing and learning and devoting myself to. That this world and this physical plane is a plane of illusion. And if you lose touch with your spirit and you lose faith with the goodness and the justice and you deal with just appearances, you are lost. You are lost. Everything in this world, no matter how horrifying it appears, there is a justice going on because the spirit doesn't die. It's just this huge theater. And it can get pretty wild at times. But we cannot lose our compassion in the theater. We cannot be cavalier, and we cannot organize and strategize to deal with it through our intellect. The only way to really get in touch with spirit and really experience and believe that the soul lives on is through your heart. Through your heart, opening your heart and going through all the things you don't want to go through. You have to go through the fire of loss. You have to go through the fire of disappointment. You have to go through the heartbreak of absolute endings. You have to go through them again and again and again. You cannot learn to deal with death by trying to avoid it. You got to get up close and personal with it. And you got to see past all of its scary monster shadows, because the body does die. And so does the personality, and so does the ego. But the spirit doesn't die. And when you can shift to the spirit, everything in the world shifts back. And that scary place begins to make sense again. I've had lots of companionship with spirit along the way. Many of my own experiences have been other side experiences that have changed my life. When I first moved to Chicago, I was miserable. I hated it here, I have to say. I wasn't getting grounded. I joined the airlines. I didn't belong in the airlines. I quit the airlines. My brother had a girlfriend who didn't like me. I couldn't live with him. I was sort of homeless. So I called my best friend and said, "Let's move. I have to move back to Denver. Come and help me move." So she, who was another psychic, came and helped me move. We packed up my Volkswagen. It was an incredibly cold January day, and we started off, two psychics on the road for Denver. She asked me, "Do you need a map?" I said, "Map? Who needs a map? We're psychic. Let's drive." In Milwaukee, we figured we better turn around. And then we decided that we were going to have a juice fast. We were deciding that not only would we move back to Denver, but we were going to move to our new life. So we were going to have a juice fast. We were only going to drink tomato juice all the way to Denver. She was from Minnesota, and she liked it cold. I was from Denver, and I liked it hot. We had this little Volkswagen with the little heater on the floor. We'd be driving along, and I'd crank the heat. Pretty soon she's melting. Then she'd shove the thing down, and I'm freezing, but we never said a word to one another. Finally, we're about the middle of Nebraska in the worst snowstorm that has happened. What was that year? 1980, 78, 79. It was such a blizzard. You couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. We're kind of having this passive-aggressive cold-hot war going on. We stop for gas, luckily. We fill up the Volkswagen. We get back in the car, loaded to the nines. We start going, and I turn the heat off, and finally she said, "That's it. Turn that damn heat off." And we started fighting in the snow. And we're all stressed out and hypoglycemic beyond belief and cross-eyed and screaming. And all of a sudden, I turned around, and there is a woman waving. We're lost in this blizzard, and I'm going to run. We both screamed, and I stepped on the brakes, and we slid into a snowbank, and we both sat there, and we both looked at each other, and I said, "I killed her." And she said, "I know." So we sat there for a few more minutes, and I said, "Can I turn the heat on?" "We gotta go look." And we went out and we looked in the snow. In this blizzard, honest, couldn't see a thing in front of you. We're freezing to death. We look, there's nobody there. There is nobody there. We did this for 20 minutes, and finally I said, "Well, we gotta go." And she said, "That's right. Maybe we missed her. We'll read about it tomorrow." So we get in the car, and we start driving. In 45 minutes, we see lights. Now, we are in the middle of Nebraska because we stopped and got gas, and we had a gas receipt, and it was timed. We're in the middle of Nebraska. The next thing we know, we're on the edge of Denver. There's no way we could be on the edge of Denver because we were in the middle of Nebraska. And it takes 18 hours to drive in a good car, and we were in my old 1964 Volkswagen loaded to the ground. But we're in Denver. And we keep getting closer. We're in Denver. It was like a time warp. We could not figure it out. But we were home. We were home. It was 2 in the morning. We weren't expected to be there till 8 in the morning, and there was no snow. It just flipped. It was a time warp, and that angel came and saved our butts. It was an angel. It was this beautiful woman with no coat on, and she waved us into a new dimension. It was so extraordinary that my girlfriend did her PhD on her thesis on it. And we had all the little things from Milwaukee and Chicago and Denver for the gas to prove it. So that was the first experience that I had of another dimension. Later in my life, I had another experience when I was married. Going underwater with 2 kids, raising these kids, and completely psychically depleted. My first daughter was born. We were renovating the house. The second daughter was born. She never slept. And I ended up in this loop of anxiety and exhaustion and no sleep. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. It was completely a first chakra blowout. And my heart started to stop. And I would pass out and black out. And so I went to the doctor, and he said, "You really are dying of sleep deprivation. And I need to check you into the hospital." And I put a huge stink up about that. And he said, "Well, the only other thing is I'm going to send you on a 2 to 3 week vacation, and you have to go away. You have to get out of this loop." So I very reluctantly left the girls with my husband and went to Hawaii. And it was February. It was gray and rainy, but it was great because for some reason there I was able to sleep. And I slept and slept and slept and slept and slept and slept for days. Finally, one day I got up and decided to go sit on the beach, which was too gray and too rainy to enjoy. And I started to walk, and all of a sudden my spirits had turned. And I turned off the beach and walked into the city. And when I was there, all of a sudden I see a little tiny bookstore. It was probably no bigger than this stage. I thought, well, that's pretty good. It's a metaphysical bookstore. That was a good vibe. And I walked in and started looking around, and this woman was checking in some of her new products, and she said, can I help you? And I said, no, that's fine. I'll just look around. And I turned the corner and started walking down one aisle, and there was this absolutely beautiful, magnificent, gorgeous, ebony black man with beautiful white teeth, a white cap, a white outfit, and a white cape. And he just stepped out in front and said, hello. And it caught me by surprise, and I said, hello. And he said, I've been waiting for you. Now, of course, I'm in a metaphysical bookstore, so I think, well, that's a good line. He said, come over here. And he walks over to this bin. And in the bin are big posters, and he pulls out this poster of an angel. But she's beached and trashed. She just crashed on the beach. And he goes, here you are. And I started laughing. I said, that's pretty good. That definitely looks like how I feel these days. And he said, but look. And he pulls out this other poster. It's a picture of a male angel who's picking up the angel who has just crashed on the beach. And he said, you forgot your partner. You forgot to dance. And I stood there holding these two posters. And I thought, you're right. Because ever since I got pregnant and bought the house, my husband and I went into overdrive. We were trying to renovate the house. We were trying to raise these kids. He took on another job. He was traveling 5 out of 7 days a week. I was trying to do readings. We never saw each other. If we did, it was a fight. And we certainly never had any fun. But when we dated, all we did was dance. And I said, that's so great. And he goes, go home and dance. Don't ever forget to dance. And he swooped his cape around. It was like this big whoosh of white. And he went to the back room. Now I'm standing next to the woman checking things in, no further away than Diane. And she looks up at me as I'm standing with these posters, and she said, can I help you? And I said, oh no, that guy's been helping me just fine. And she looked at me and said, what guy? And I looked at her and I said, that guy. The big, very tall black guy with the white cape. She looked at me and she said, what are you talking about? And I said, the one that just went in the back room. So she gets up very nervously and goes marching back, hello, hello. She disappears behind the curtain. Then she comes back out looking at me really strange. She said, there's no one back there. And I looked at these two posters. And I looked at her, and they were of angels. And I just burst out crying. And I said, I've been helped, thank you. And I just went out the door. And that struck me so deeply. And I kept hearing him say, don't forget to dance. Don't forget to dance. Don't forget to dance. So most people have these sort of angelic blonde hair, blue eyes. I got someone who is just ebony. But he grounded me. And that's when I realized that even though you have these intellectual and maybe even emotional acceptances of life and death, you have to take care of your spirit. You are spirit. But if you don't take care of your spirit, you're dead. Your body might function, but you're dead. You're 75% dead anyway. So it's not enough to just know, understand, accept, or believe. But for those of you who want to talk to people on the other side or connect to them, it requires your vibration to be at a certain frequency. And the frequency that you require is a frequency of an open heart. You have to have the frequency of enough self-love that you can actually raise your awareness past your own judgments and begin to hear the music of spirit. And usually the first contact with spirit will be music. You'll hear some little music and think, what was that? It was interesting with my mom, still tone deaf, absolutely deaf as a doornail, but she hears music all the time. The second visitation will often be roses and flowers and smells. The spirit of those who have crossed over will come and capture your attention through your senses. But if you're completely numbed out in your senses, because you're operating on hyperdrive, and because you haven't slept enough, and because you're so preoccupied with tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and because you're not eating and you're not sleeping and you're not doing things that support the spirit in you, you won't feel it. You won't hear it. You'll connect with the other side when you connect first with your spirit. Once my guide said, tell the people they want to have a near-death experience to try a near-life one too. Fall in love with your life. It is theater. It is theater. I had another time in my life where I was really, really very sick. Very sick. And I was soul sick. Do you know what soul sickness is? Soul sickness is when you have no energy, you have no vitality, you have no love. You're depleted and they can't find anything wrong with you, and doctors give you some generic thing called chronic fatigue syndrome or Epstein-Barr, or maybe you're depressed, or maybe you're just not eating enough, or maybe you have some disease we haven't discovered, but as far as I can tell, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, that's a soul sickness. When everything in you feels like it's flat tires and dying. When there's no joy. When there's no oomph. And nothing, that's soul sickness. And that's a very common syndrome that I see now. Soul sickness. Because you get disconnected from your spirit. And you don't feed your spirit. And you don't do anything or choose anything to grow your soul. That happened to me. I got so bogged down with babies and houses and fighting with my husband and worry and overdoing that I got very, very sick in my heart. I was mad at God and my guides for making my life so hard. Very mad. And I worked so hard and tried so hard, and yet nothing was working out, according to my plan anyway. And I remember laying in bed one afternoon. My husband took the girls out to the backyard and he was washing the car. I could hear him playing with the hose and they were laughing, and I kind of drifted into this sort of semi-conscious state. All of a sudden, I was surrounded. It was like my body was elevated and I was surrounded with these incredible Native American, beautifully dressed healers. One was at my head. Two were by my side on both sides, and one was at my feet. And they were talking about me as if I wasn't there. And they were speaking a language that I didn't recognize, but I understood. And they had these huge gourds and smoke, and they were shaking the gourds over me and running the smoke over me, discussing me while I was observing the whole thing, still listening to my kids outside, still hearing my husband. And then they shook the rattles and shook my feet. And then they said, you'll be okay now. You're back. And I woke up from this. I was wide awake. And all of a sudden, my soul wasn't sick anymore. I could hear my girls, and I was so appreciative of them. I had lost touch with the gift that they were. I was so buried in resentment and feeling sorry for myself. I lost touch with that. I lost touch with that I had choices. I lost touch with that I don't have to do it all. And I just sat in bed for the longest time, and I could hear those gourds. They stuck with me for at least a year. I could hear them. Shh, 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 shh. They were praying over me. I was so grateful. We have spirit guides with us at all times. But what we need to do is begin to shift the channel and understanding of who we are, your spirit. Do you understand yourself to be spirit? Do you really? Do you know your spirit? Do you know your spirit? Do you ever think about yourself as spirit? Do you love your spirit? And the people that you know, do you know them as spirit? Do you recognize them as spirit? Do you have humility when you're in their presence because they're so beautiful? The spirit? That's what's wrong with this picture. You know, the sixth sensory world is the only way we can go. We're spirit. And finally, thank God, the quantum physicists caught up with us. They finally agree, it's true. It's true. We're spirit. And here's the incredible thing I'm learning. not just intellectually, but really learning in my heart, we're all one spirit. One of us. There's one consciousness of spirit that we all collectively share. So it goes on with me, goes on with you. Your pain is my pain. Your victory is my victory. I'm learning that. I'm beginning to learn that that's why the veils are thinning. And we're beginning now to have collectively more out-of-body experiences, more psychic experiences, more near-death experiences, because we are all spirit that doesn't die. It changes form, it changes energy, but we are one shared spirit. So the spirit energies that have crossed out of physical are just a higher octave of who we are. And we can begin to access those octaves and begin to engage in a more spirited life if we begin to get over ourselves, really. That's one of the tools my guides say. Get over yourself and get into your spirit. Love your spirit. And here's something that I would propose that you all think about. Do you know your spirit? Could you describe your spirit? Could you define? Don't tell me your story. Don't tell me your history. Don't tell me your drama. Don't tell me your challenges. Don't tell me your plans. Tell me your spirit. Who is your spirit? What does your spirit love? What makes you feel so alive that you feel eternal? What makes you feel so excited that you can light the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center with your enthusiasm alone? What makes you feel so expanded in your heart that you would have compassion for every homeless person you saw and would invite them into your house for dinner? Do you have any experience of that? Because that's your spirit. Do you have any experience of that? Do you have any consciousness of that? My mom was helping a woman in Denver who was Hungarian. She had been through every trauma, drama, and episode of how woe is me that you could imagine. And believe me, it all did merit a huge gasp of shock that she survived. Concentration camps, being shot, husbands dying, physical illnesses, trauma and drama that really, really humbled even the most miserable of us all. And she met my mother because she was dying. My mother took care of her and took her to the doctor in Denver. And every time she would get into the car, she'd start in on how her life was miserable. And my mother said, first of all, Olga, I have to tell you, God is merciful. I'm deaf, so I can't hear you. So you're talking to the wall. But I can feel your vibration. And I can assure you that the vibration you're concentrating on is certainly not doing you any good. So I'm not going to take you to the doctor and work against you. Because the focus of your energy, the focus of your communication, the focus of your attention is really a love affair with your misery. And God forbid, let me not break up any important love affairs. So, you have a choice. In the car, zip it. And I'll take you to the doctor, and you're going to talk to me about what is good in your life. Well, this woman was annoyed. You're kidding. My mom said, I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. She said, well, sulked all the way there and back. But so began a weekly routine to go for checkups. My mom would stop her. Can't listen. Tell me something good. Well, finally she laughed and she said, that's a start. That's a start. And so she started inch by inch, ounce by ounce, refocusing her vibration and coming up with something good. At first it was sort of a submission. All right, fine. But pretty soon she got over herself and started to chat about things, however minor, that were pleasant. Well, 6 months later, this woman went from being in a walker to walking on her own. And 1.5 years later, on her 89th birthday, she danced with my dad. And the doctor was there and said, I don't know what miracle you're doing or pulling off here, but this is quite astounding. And the nurse, or my mom's friend Olga, said to the doctor, zip it. I only want to hear something good. You know what that's about? Because life and death, it's all about vibration. And when you're not in physical form, you're just in a different vibration. But you can raise your vibration now. And if you raise your vibration now, there will be very little separation between you and the angelic energies. Very little. Very little. But you have to get off the static AM talk radio and start communicating a more classical FM. That's how you connect with the guides. You vibrate to a higher energy. But do not underestimate the power, the life-affirming, life-giving power of a higher vibration. I sent a client of mine to Denver. When she moved, she was my client for many years, and when she moved to Denver, I said, you have to talk to my mom when you go. Know her. She's one of my best teachers, especially when it comes to life and death. She had faced it too many times herself. Well, this girl got pregnant, she got married, got pregnant. She was having the American dream. She came to my mom on weekly visits, went to her courses in miracles, and everything was going smoothly. But when the baby was born, it was born with the umbilical cord around its neck. And the baby was born, they pronounced him brain dead. She was beyond consolable. But she had my mom come to the hospital. They got the baby resuscitated. But they said they put the baby on life support and said, brain damage, this baby isn't going to make it. They were Italian. The Italian family was beyond consolable. All of them were out of their minds with grief. My mom said, this baby is fine. What are you all doing? And she looked right at Teresa and she said, this baby is fine. What are you doing? And they were freaking out. And she said, leave me with the baby. Leave me with the baby. And take your disbelief and your drama and your vibration of death out of here. This soul is fine. The body had a little rough start, but that is not the baby. The spirit is here. And the spirit will enter when you all calm down. Well, Teresa said, go be with the baby. And the doctors were furious. Furious. They said, we can't do that. She's not family. Teresa said, she's my mother. She's my mother. You can do it. So they were furious with my mother. They were disgusted. They shooed the family out, and my mother sat with the baby. The spirit, she said, and talked to the spirit. What do you want? The spirit told her, I want to come in. This family has no faith. My mom sat for a while and prayed. She went the next morning and she said to Teresa, the baby's fine. I'm going home. Well, they took the baby off life support and the doctors said the baby started breathing on its own. Family was just overjoyed, but the doctor said, don't get overjoyed. Right. The physical body's breathing. This is brain-damaged baby, and it's vegetable. There's nothing to look forward to. My mother refused to participate. When that baby turned 1 year old, it was on the front page of the Denver newspaper. It said, miracle baby. Baby was fine. No damage. Nothing. Spirit. Spirit, but if you're spirit, you can have miracles. If you identify with personality and appearances, you only have the dark night of the soul really to try to keep away. It's up to you. It's up to you. That's why Christ said they have eyes but they do not see. They have ears but they do not hear. It's because when we look at the world of appearances, we miss it. It's up to you to shift your perspective, sensitivity, awareness, identification. Do you ever fully connect to the you are spirit? Could you possibly imagine something that radical? And here's what has to happen. You'll have to give up your addictions to your emotions, your addiction to your personality, and your addiction to your drama. And that's a challenge. That's the challenge. If you truly want to live where there's no veil between life and death, if you truly want to connect to the eternal experience of you, if you truly want to have an ongoing dialogue with those whom you love on the other side, you're going to have to give up something. And it is your addictions to your story. It is your addictions to your drama, your emotions. It is your addictions to your limitations. It is your commitment to your suffering. It is your investment in your disappointments. You will have to give that up. Now, some of you are fortunate enough to have life-death experiences that sort of shatter that real quickly for you. Some of us are on the slow boat. But it really boils down to, no matter what train you're on, a choice. It's a choice. You either choose to have sanity and recognize your spirit, or you suffer. But either way, your spirit doesn't die. Either way, you are spirit, and there is no ending. Only learning, only theater. And you can enjoy the theater if you really know you're the director of the theater. Okay, so that's all I have to say for the moment. Does anybody want to ask me anything? Okay, what's your name? Carla. Nice to meet you, Carla. What would you like to ask me?
I'm very interested in this vibration because I find that I fluctuate a great deal.
With up and down. That's a good question.
And I'm wondering, are you able to hold the frequency that you're using for us today? Are you able to
This
stay
is my
there?
pretty normal frequency now. But there are things that you need to do to create a high frequency. The first thing you need to do is really, truly want to know your spirit and love it. And when you love your spirit, you begin to see everyone else's spirit, so how can you not love them? So what changes your frequency and keeps it high is love. Love of self, love of others. What you're feeling is that I really do love my spirit. I can do without my personality from time to time. And I'm still making peace with my body, but I do love my spirit. And I love yours. I see and I look for yours. When I look at people, I look for their spirit. And by the way, spirit is fire. It's the fire in you. It's the spark in you. It's the creativity in you. Even if it does create a little drama, oh well, so what? I can love it and appreciate it anyway. It's the life force in you that makes you animate, that I have great respect for. It's exciting. Whatever you're creating, there's something in there that creates. I love that. And that's what puts you on a high frequency. You know the other thing that puts you on a high frequency? Humor. Humor. Honestly. Humor. My mother always said, the situation is critical, but never serious. Never. Find the humor. Find the humor. Find the humor. Be committed to that. Find the humor. And you know, people who have experienced tragedies, if you talk to people who've gone through, say, World War II or the Holocaust or have survived even the new age and generation now from Bosnia now, they're hilarious. Those who really endure are hilarious. It's like Viktor Frankl said, you cannot change what happens to you, but you can always choose to how you respond. And so that's another thing. Always, and here's a mantra to keep you in high frequency. I have a choice. Just have a choice. And by the way, do you want to raise your vibration right now? Breathe through the nose, out through the mouth, and let out the sound. And move around a little bit. Okay, do it again. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Move around a little bit. Then this time breathe through the nose, out through the mouth, and go ha! Breathe around and move around a little bit. And then look at one another. Not roll to roll, soul to soul. Look at one another and share a breath. Share a breath in the eyes. Look at the person next to you and share a breath. Look at the one you're not willing to look at, who looks a little bit different and scary, and share a breath. Yeah, go where you're really afraid to go. Look right in their eyes and share a breath. Do you feel immediately? Yes. Do you see what I'm talking about? The minute you share a breath, you raise vibration. The minute you share a breath, because your breath is spirit. Your breath is your spirit. And to be inspired is to bring your spirit in. To be inspired, to inspire. And the reason our vibration gets lowered is because we shut off our vibration. The throat is the chimney of the heart. The heart is the center of your spirit. So when you choke off your throat, you choke off your spirit. So when you say, ha! And thump your chest, everybody's out of the pool, and your spirit can speak again. It works. Practical tools to live a spirited life. Live it. Don't carry it around like a philosophy in a notebook. Live it. Have the courage, but spirit is fire. And you'll have to be willing to dance in the fire. Because the five sensory world would have you be unconscious and live in fear and ego and doubt and have you be afraid so it can control you. To live a spirited life is to say no. I'm not going to do that. It's not to say I'm not afraid. The human condition is fear. But you know that that's part of your soul's growth, that you have a human condition, but it's something you have. It's not something you are. You are a spirit who is learning to deal with this human condition called fear. And if you don't hide it and you just deal with it and you just have fun with it, it gets real small real fast. Don't ever say, I am somebody. Say, I am spirit. If you ask my mom who she is, or Charlie, or any of my teachers, they'll all say, I'm spirit. They won't even say their name. Try that during the Christmas season. Say, I am the spirit of Christmas. The eternal inner child. You have a question back there?
I want you to tell us about your tarot cards.
Oh, they are so great. My Trust Your Vibes cards are psychic sit-ups for your spirit to come out and play. I wrote those cards. They are the end result of 35 years of working with people. And it's an answer to your question of how to stay on that higher frequency. There's several ways to work them. First, each card is an opportunity to make a choice. So when you work with the cards and you pull a card, it resonates to what choice would most appropriately bring you back into high vibration. Writing for people, but her true heart's desire was to write. And working with the deck, in 30 days, she wrote her first book, and in the next 30 days, using the cards, she got it published. She said, it happened. Just like following the yellow brick road. I just next to next to next. So the cards have a very powerful punch. They're definitely for people who want to shift and change, because every card will ask you to shift and change something very specifically that you are not using choice with now. So it is a great Christmas present. Give it to you. Give it to yourself. I had a friend call me from New York. She said, I'm so depressed. I'm afraid to go out in New York. It just is. She has fragile emotional health, and she said, I get so nervous and and I said, pull a card. And the card that came up was a card about how to cloak yourself in light. She said, I never heard about that. It was very specific instructions in how to cloak yourself in light. And it got her through the winter. She gets very scared and very weak, and she said it worked. So it's a wonderful thing. They're psychic sit-ups because books, and they are fabulous. And if you're going to read the book, Trust Your Vibes, that's 33 ways to keep your vibration high. Choices that you can do, little tiny choices. The other thing to keep your vibration high is to speak about your spirit positively. And let's stop putting these extraordinary parentheses around it. Why don't we talk about our spirit and our death and life experiences in our stride? Instead of, the weirdest thing happened. Now what if we just said, yeah, I was, hanging out with the angels today. We had a good time. I know that the angels are sitting around, hanging around going, did you hear from anybody? Nope, I didn't hear from anybody today. Heck, get them those cards. Maybe they'll call on us then. Who else would like to ask me a question?
Could you talk a little bit about personality, shedding the personality? And I'm having a little challenge with that.
That's such a good question because your personality is 99% the source of all your misery. Nothing personal. No, the thing is, actually love your personality and know that you have more than one. Know that you have more than one. What I do, and this works very well, is to create what you call your secret selves. Because you're not functioning out of one personality, you're functioning out of a multiple of personalities, some from present time, some from family dynamics, and some from past lives, your own. So, name them. So the one that likes to be out in the public and is real cavalier and knows everything, you can call him Dapper Dan. Love him. He has tools to serve you, but you may not want Dapper Dan to necessarily run your love life. Do you see what I'm saying? Because he might be a little too superficial and guarded. I've got one that's called Chachi. Chachi dresses me. She likes jewelry and clothes and fun. I've got one whose name is Whip. She runs the business and she keeps things very grounded in my home and in my office so I can function. I've got another one, her name is Vicky Victim. She comes up when I'm overworking and she has a twin sister named Vicky Vicious. And a brother named Tank. Comes in, pum, 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 pum. My husband, Patrick Tully, oldest of 9, Catholic family. He's got one I call the Monsignor. Mr. Righteous, the famine's still on. And then there's one who cooks in the kitchen. I call him Patricio. He wears berets and likes to paint. So when he asks me out on a date, I'll say, well, it depends. Who's asking? The Monsignor or Patricio? I need to know before I ask. Be creative. But here's the key. Any function of your personality that is operating is trying to help you. Some of it is from past lives. However, and they're using their strategies, but they may not be good. If your past life was Sister Mary Saved the Day, then maybe she shouldn't run your love life. You know, she doesn't know how to date very comfortably. Or, so you need to recognize that these are aspects of your soul patterns, that you're evolving. And the best way to shatter a soul pattern that is not assisting you is through humor. Through humor. Don't banish anyone. Besides, they're all in the closet knocking anyway. Let me out of here, I'm going to get you. You know that, so don't try to suppress and don't be. Here's something I say. Do not be spiritual. Do not be spiritual. That's the most obnoxious soul personality pattern of them all. Be spirited instead. Spiritual is righteous and controlled and self-indicting and God knows what else, and sometimes you wear weird clothes and put on interesting perfumes, but it really is all a drama. Love it, but don't be it. Be spirited and laugh at all your personalities. Love them to death, but no, not one of them is who you really are. Does that help?
Thank you.
So let's have one of yours. What's your most obnoxious one?
Obnoxious personality?
Yeah, the one you hide is covert, works underground.
Little lightning.
Okay, he strikes and you don't know it hit you.
Yeah.
Love him. Love him. And you know what? Here's an interesting piece of information. Name your personalities and your sub-personalities and know when they act out that what they're telling you is you're not loving you. When little lightning strikes, what part of you are you neglecting? What part of you are you not being compassionate with? What part of you are you hiding? That little lightning refuses to be banished. So when they come up and act up, they're giving you important information. Take care of me. Love yourself. And that's how you manage it most comfortably. Or you can go to 15 years of psychotherapy, but I don't know if that's as fun. No harm meant for those of you in psychotherapy. Try it in psychotherapy. Okay, anything else?
In my experience, I I was like self-diagnosing myself as a paranoid schizophrenic because when the beings appeared in front of me, I became 5 people at the same time. Most of the time you only have one thought going through your mind, but I had all this energy inside of me. And I knew that the people that I was creating was just out of fear because I was saying, you know, what do you think? Oh, I don't know. You know, I'm just talking to myself because I was so frightened. But they were, in my best analytical mind, exterior to me, and they had a mission to do because they were going to take Mom across. You know, when I went to a spiritualist church, there was all this obsession with finding out what happened. I ran into this guy that was at the church, and he said he'd been institutionalized. And he said, it kind of coincides with my joke paper that I gave to Diane today. He said that, you know, the spirits start out as your friends, but then they'll turn into your enemies. And, you know, I don't buy this stuff because nothing should change your own morality.
Well, here's what's really going on, and I don't know the final word, but this is what I know to the point that I know, and I have a brother who's a schizophrenic as well, so I have a lot of personal experience. There are many sources and layers and types of vibrations of guides, and what really needs to happen is that you can become, your ego identification can get so weak that you don't discern well and you lose grounding. So all of a sudden it's like channel surfing, and you might end up on channels that are opportunistic channels versus staying on higher frequencies, which is why the best way to avoid getting the different influences from interfering and eliminating those influences you don't want is to take excellent care of your body, because that's the radio. Be very focused on your goals, and to have your own conscious mind really practiced and attuned to the highest of your own vibrational interests. So you pray, and you keep connected to what feeds your spirit, and you stay on target and task with what really helps you, and that makes you love your own life. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, that's all fine and dandy, but I think that at that moment in my life, I mean, I lost control. They had taken over on the way.
Right.
I mean, my mom was dying, so I didn't have any control. But I disagree with this guy that said that these things.
I disagree too.
They go in with this satanic crap. I kept accusing them of being Satan. You know, I said, I was going to commit suicide. I told them, "You're not taking my mother. I'm going to commit suicide and hold her." Well, that caused a battle. You know,
I'm sure.
You know, I mean, they stopped that shit real quick. Let me tell you. But I was going to do that. I almost committed suicide 4 times that night because I was so. I said I didn't know where they were from. But you know, in the end, even if I was insane or whatever, I mean.
In the end, your spirit prevailed.
Well, of course, you keep a sense of humor.
Right, and that's how your spirit prevailed.
That's right. This more when I felt like when I saw these beings and everything. Once you get your focus right, it's like being in a cartoon. Cartoon.
You're right. There are many dimensions of vibration, and the key is, it's not valuable to you to have these distractions.
And I don't believe they're Satan.
I don't either, but there are negative energies. And it's just vibration.
From you.
Yeah, you know, it's just vibration.
Right.
It's like dissonant energy. And the key is the way to stay in tune to good vibration, useful vibration, is to take care of your body, be real loving about your goals, stay in your heart, but take care of your body. Because physically you are under so much stress and grief and probably very isolated. And that's part of the problem here in our culture, is that we have no cultural consciousness to how to help each other go through death and loss, and we're very isolated. Part of my message is, if we begin to see how we all share the same spirit, we will help each other far more immediately and more compassionately instead of run away from death. We'll collectively gather and cross over. You could be crossing over together, helping. So beautiful for you that your spirit prevailed under such dark and difficult conditions.
Well, my mother, sadly enough, at the end of her life, always, and she's spoken her life, you're lucky with your mother, because my mother, and just like my aunt who is 90, is totally convinced there's absolutely nothing after you die.
Right.
And it's
Most
very,
people
very
are.
sad.
It
very
is.
sad, and I can't tell her a damn thing.
Well, you know, that is one thing. We can't, but we can live a certain degree of peace. We can live and vibrate and emote a certain degree of calm that will capture attention. But you can't push on a door when it has to open inward. So, question? The way to get in touch with your spirit guides most directly is to have real specific issues you want them to help you with. And here's something to do for your spirit guides right now. Put a banquet out for them. Put a banquet out in your home for your spirit guides. Put on it whatever you want. They're your spirit guides. But acknowledge and begin to communicate with them as real forces of light and love in your life. Ask them very specifically for what you want, and be sure to thank them. One of the things my sister does whenever her spirit guides help her is she lights a stick of incense and to say thank you. I like to put on music. My spirit guides like rock and roll, so I put on special music, and we all dance to say thank you. But you have a relationship, a sensitivity. Don't wait for Elvis to come through. It's very subtle. But if you feel you're being helped, you're being helped.
That's right.
If you sense that there's an energy of light and support, say thank you. This is new for me, but I'm going to accept it. And get out of your head. Get out of your head. You cannot negotiate the world of spirit through the intellect. Walk, move. By the way, only the mind stands still. Body and the spirit move. Go for a walk and talk to your spirits. Go for a walk and talk to them. Ask them for what you want. Ask them for help. And say, I only want ones that are really qualified. I don't want any just people who have nothing better to do out there. I want the highest, most qualified, loving, light-filled, good for all concerned. Here's another interesting little tidbit of information. When it comes to your vibes, when you get them in the gut vibes are for you. They take care of you. They will address your well-being. They will address your safety and security. When they come in the heart, they're for all of us. They will not just be interested in only you. When you get vibes in the heart, they will be very much the direction for the betterment of all concerned. So when you get a gut feeling, ask your spirit to raise it to a heart-based feeling so that you can make choices that are the good for all concerned, and you'll immediately get a second vibe.
You'll be traveling with Sylvia Brown, who's been
Mhm.
of great interest to me. I'm sure many of us watch her when she's on Montel. And I'm wondering on a one-to-one basis, because apparently you have a close bond, does she come across to you as she does to the TV?
She's exactly the same.
She is.
A little rough, blunt, direct, and very sincere.
And I say to myself, this is a Libra?
I know. But you know what? I don't have a close bond with her. I have a professional association with her by the fact that we share publishers.
Louise Hay.
Now, I do have a close bond with Louise Hay. We share birthdays. She's a Libra too.
And what is that birth?
October 8th.
No,
But Sylvia Brown, definitely is someone I don't know personally. What I do know of her in my professional take is that what you see on TV and what you see in private are the same. But I will say this that I do know. She's very sincere.
Yes.
She's not
very
right. She's
sincere.
not right all the time.
I will never, and here's my answer to that. She's not right all the time. Let me say this. In the world of the six sensory energies, we do not live in the world of right and wrong. We just live in the world of what is true for me for now.
She was on Oprah Winfrey and sat right there, and I watched her. She said, President Clinton never had sex with that girl. Wrong on that one.
Well, I don't know if that channel is necessarily the most important anyway. She probably had some good information, wrong channel. But the truth is that whether it's Sylvia Brown or someone like myself, or John Hollander. We are just models. Do not look at any one of us, and that's what I say in every one of my books, for the answer or the way. Our job, when we're really correctly understood, is to show freely how to dialogue with Spirit, how to express the unseen side comfortably, how to stay true to yourself when the world will say, you're wrong, you're crazy. It's still not to buy into the right, wrong needs of others, but to stay true to what your Spirit is saying for you for now. And that's our function. That's why we go out. At least I'll say, that's mine, and from what I know of Sylvia, that is hers too. I can't speak absolutely, but that's my experience.
I have a question concerning dreams.
Mhm.
How do you
Dreams?
know, yes, if it's a psychic dream or if it's
A riffraff?
something you ate?
Digestive dream?
If it's a psychic dream, how do you know what
You know, I really believe you can tell the difference if you start paying attention. I believe that the quality of psychic dreams hangs with you, stays with you, holds, you feel the energy and the aura of that experience in the dream state long after you wake up. If it's indigestion, you usually forget by noon. You see? But if it's truly an out-of-body experience, a lesson, a classroom, a premonition, the vibration will leave an impact. The best thing to do is record your dreams, and you'll begin to see they have their own dynamic, their own vibration, their own tenor, their own way, and you'll begin to distinguish for yourself. It's not a one-size-fits-all response, but I will say, generally speaking, when a dream is from a higher octave, you will feel it for a while. You won't forget it, okay?
I was wanting to ask about dreams myself. I've recently been through the heaviest loss of my life, the death of my mother, and people have been commenting about how calmly I've been handling it when handling a whole series of traumatic things that have happened recently. But man, when I go to bed at night and as soon as I'm asleep, I have all of these wacky, I think riff-raff is exactly, somehow feels exactly like the right word for it. Extremely crazy, wacky, negatively oriented dreams that so that I wake up exhausted instead of rested.
Yeah.
And
What would be helpful to you
what
is to get massage therapy, to help pull some of this grief and unprocessed emotion and the feelings of others and you're going through a lot of energies that you cannot necessarily deal with right now, especially in the conscious state. Massage therapy is so profoundly helpful when going through grief. And I think anybody who's going through any loss process should go through massage at least 3 times a week if you can during the process. And so you can consciously move through some of that unexpressed emotion and experience and grief. So then you can get a little more rest, because if you can't rest, there might be a bit of a vicious cycle building here. So I know that you can get, if it's a financial issue, I do know that the massage schools will often give free massages or very inexpensive massages. And I do think you should try that.
I know someone, I think she'll
Good.
give free massages.
Good. And tell her you want massages that are quiet and not a lot of coaching you. Let the body talk to you, okay? Your body can talk to you and process some of this so you don't have to do it when you're trying to recuperate. And I'm sorry for your loss, but I know that the energies of your mother are very much with you. Still.
You talk just a little bit about the spirits and then the influences that we may have brought from a prior life and how they intermingle.
Right. Well, each life is a classroom, and we really pick up where we left off. It's not like we were knights in this one and royalty in that one and dastardly Dan in that one. Really, we just very incrementally evolve. So our personalities remain containers of old stories. You can pretty much figure out your own past lives pretty quickly by looking at some of your most predominant patterns and traditions. That's you. If you're like always worried about the family, you probably come from some clan or dynasty forever. You know, if you feel like you're the outsider, you were probably on the high seas, adventure, always leaving the home. Do you see what I'm saying? If you're really hung up on ritual, you were probably in some religious sect for a while. You know, it's not too difficult when you begin to look at the creative eyes. And you will bring guides over from those episodes as well. So it's just like we're kind of inching along instead of lurching all over the place. And if you do feel, for example, overly boxed in from some old patterns, you can ask the guides to help you release those patterns and help you start experimenting with new ways and new choices in being. I had a client who had patterns of being what we laughingly called a rootin' tootin' cowboy. But he was a mercenary, he was a soldier, he was an outlaw, he was, you know, and he everything now was trigger happy. Everybody give him one dirty look and it'd be, you know, what are you doing? And he used all these outlaw guides to start giving him new strategies. And he could transition it with that humor and that creative consciousness pretty quickly. So it's like, ask your guides to shoot you a new solution instead of just shoot dead the person in front of you with a dirty look. You know, it kind of worked out. I have to say, what I feel is if I'm going to say what's one core strategy for really lifting up your spirit, really beginning to live a spirited life, to commune with people on the other side and not feel loss and separation, is to reactivate your creativity. What I experience in most people is a colossal failure of imagination and creativity. You're just kind of going along with whatever is strategically out there instead of using the power of your own creative imagination to invent. You can heal. You can heal and break through with creativity. I've not necessarily seen a lot heal through the intellect. But I have seen just about everything heal ultimately through creativity, through art, through humor, through resourcefulness, through imagination, through trying on new ways, through expressing yourself out of the box. So there's a tool in Trust Your Vibes called Use Crayons, and it's about letting your spirit be creative, and it invents itself in every moment. So you have your secret selves, and you have your past lives, and you can line up all your guides and name them whatever you want. They'll work for you. Be creative. This is something that I think people are really disinclined to do, and that creative spirit, the creativity is the spirit of you. So the more creative, the more lively you'll be, the more enlightened you'll be, and the more successful you'll be in whatever spiritual endeavor you have, including your life. So, I could take one more question. May I ask what?
My two nephews get a real healthy dose of right-wing Catholicism from their mom, and I'm trying to steer them into the
right way.
right way, but
the morally superior way. No, the thing is, here's the thing, Maz. You have to respect. I said we go inch by inch. So they incarnated right where they left off.
Okay.
There are no accidents. There is something in that container of real extreme right-wing experience that those souls left off in. They probably wrote the rules. Now they got to live by them. Yeah. So get the fuller picture and say, well, when you're done with this, I'm over here having a different movie.
Well, they seem to be lapping it up. I mean, the older one is lapping up all this stuff. I gave him Trust Your Vibes cards, and he loves his little pendulum for his chakras, and the younger one is
He's scared.
He's 5, and he watches church TV, and
He probably was the one that wrote the rules for sure.
very interesting.
He's admiring his own work.
I guess my question is, how do I tread the fine line without offending my sister?
Well, here's the thing, Maz. Work by process, always of attraction.
Okay.
The spirited life is always by trial. You just play and have fun and never campaign. Do not campaign for anyone's reform ever in any way, ever. Just if he's watching church TV, he's digging it. He's loving it. And he will eventually, if he chooses. There are some who love it all the way down the line, and it works for them. That's what I mean. There is no right and wrong. That really is probably the very same group that probably put you to, burned you at the stake last time, which is why you have such a visceral reaction of don't go there. You might have been on the other side of that, and so you're trying to say, no. But it's all neutral now. You do your thing, I'll do mine, but there is a party over here, if you choose, okay?
Okay.
So that's important, to really understand that there are no accidents. Nobody's locked in where they don't need to be. We're all sitting right where we need to be. And like I said, very much we left off. We pick up where we left off. One more question?
Yes, please. Would you describe, because you are so good articulately, would you describe the state that the person is in, like the context, once they are able to keep their fears and that present but out there someplace and no longer invading the...
How you feel?
Yes, what is the all-over contextual feeling?
Well, yeah, she would like to know, how do you know, or what does it feel like to be in a high vibration where you are not resonating to fear and drama and upset and sickness and the muck of the world? Is that pretty much your... the way you feel is physically good in your skin. You occupy your whole body. You own your space. It's like, this is my kingdom. And very receptive and open. Very. You step into the world wanting to interface. You step in, able to connect and not get infected.
Would you say that happiness becomes bliss?
Well, bliss, I think, is definitely a consequence. Now, see, all my guides are talking to me at once here. Bliss is when you are so involved in what your spirit loves that you lose yourself.
All right, okay.
Okay, so when you're so involved in what you love, you lose yourself. You merge with the greater divine. So that's how you find your bliss. So the way to the highest vibration, what do you love? What do you love? Do that. What do you love?
I love Romanian music.
Listen and sing to that. What do you love? Do that. What do you love? Yeah. Don't you? Isn't that bliss? What do you love, Diane? Music. When you're in it, don't you? Is that not bliss? What do you love, Archana?
I love my son a lot.
Right. Isn't that just bliss? What do you? There you go. Yeah, that was very prudent and very savvy of you. What do you love, Kim?
I love light.
Yeah. Just go for it. And what do you love?
Floatingness of bliss.
Yeah, then just bliss out. Love yourself, and you'll have that every day.
When you're walking.
Right, and see, you're right. Walking. Movement. Movement. What do you love, Bob?
Color, beauty, flowers.
Right, go there. I had a client who said, well, I love Oprah and I love Starbucks. So what do? And I said, well, go there. So she started going to Starbucks every day at 6 o'clock in the morning before she went to her job as a substitute teacher. And a month and a half into it, she met a guy and they start talking because people are habitual, creatures of habit. So she's the same guy every morning, starts talking to him, and she said, well, I'm here because I'm supposed to do what I love. I love Starbucks and I love Oprah. And he said, well, that's interesting. My sister is one of the producers for Oprah, and she's looking for interns for the summer. Would you like a job? And boom, took her Starbucks and went to Oprah. That's how it works. That's how it works. That's how it works. That is how it works. So that's how you find your bliss. Do what you love every day. I have a saying in my book that my teacher Charlie taught me. Build your life around your heart. Do not try to shove your heart into your busy life. So follow what you love. Do that and you will be in bliss. Okay, does it feel like we're done? Feels like it to me. Do you have one more question? Okay, I'll take another question.
You may or may not be familiar with these words in this order. The wages of sin are death. My love is Jesus Christ. Now, how can I do Jesus Christ? It's an inspiration, and I can't repeat it. My imitation of it is...
Do what Christ said. Christ is the one that said, don't you know that ye are gods? Christ is the one that said that. Absolutely. Christ is the one who said, if you have this much belief, if you have the belief of a mustard seed, you can do greater miracles than this. Christ is the one that is my master teacher. So do what he said, and here's what he said. The Beatitudes, the parables, and the Our Father. Those are the things they know that he said historically. So if you follow those, then you're on your way.
Are you going to run tomorrow?
No, I'm teaching my own workshop tomorrow, so if you don't want to go that far at Drury Lane, I'm at Unity. Unity, North Shore. I'm doing a 2-hour workshop tomorrow as a fundraiser for the church. So if you...
What time?
I'm going to do the service at 10:30, and then the workshop is after.
What's the topic?
So, I don't know. I just show up and speak and whatever, but it is about developing the spirited life, living the spirited life.
Sonia, I just want to say that I love you so much, I just want to say that,
Thank you.
You just helped me so much on my own journey. And I remember how years ago you sent me my first Ayurvedic client before I even studied Ayurveda. And you said, you're the right person, you're the person she was supposed to go to. And I go, really? So I studied Ayurveda right away. And now years later, 6 years later, more probably, I've met wonderful Ayurvedic teachers from India. And everything you've said is what we teach in Ayurveda.
Yeah.
So it's not just Christ, it's not just the
No, it's all the teachers, by the way, agree.
Right.
All the spiritual teachers agree. Spiritual teachers of Buddha, of Christ, of Muhammad, of the great white eagle, because there's only one spirit.
That's right.
There's only one spirit. But the Christ spirit represents heart. The Buddha spirit represents mind. So we need all these different faces to develop the different, and the great white eagle represents the earth and the body. So they're all different ways to come at the same thing, which is love. Just love. Love your spirit. And when you love your spirit, how can you look around and see all the beautiful people around you and not love them? How can you not love them? They're just spirit. They look like flowers. Look at the room and look at yourselves. It's like a garden full of flowers. Look. I mean it now. Look at each other. Really look. Can you see what I'm talking about? Can you see what I'm talking about? When you look, do not look roll to roll. Look soul to soul. And when you look soul to soul, it humbles you. The beauty of this place and the beauty of the people in it, no matter what stupid things they're doing. So that's what we need to do. I think we're starting a revolution. We can be revolutionaries, but let us be revolutionaries where Christ said, you'll know them by what they do.
Right.
So let us lead lives that are spirited, lively, and loving, and people will get curious. And the guides on the other side and your family and helpers on the other side will celebrate and help. So thank you, and Merry Christmas. It's a season of light. Thank you for allowing me to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia has 20 minutes to sign books for us. So, do you want to stay here, or do you want to go up to the back? You go up to the back. She'll be signing her books, and give you a last-minute chance to pick up things up there in the bookstore. And hope to see you next week. I mean, next month. Sorry, not next week. So it's too short of a season. January 8th is our next meeting, Adrienne Chaps, and it's always on the second Saturday. So you can pencil us in and come visit us again. Thanks. Bye-bye. The meeting is always here, second Saturday. Virginia Smith still here? Oh, yes, good. Please,
Steps up here now. I'm wondering if I get No, it's all chairs on both sides.